And we're live. Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Brown. I'm the host of the Discover Your Sensory Intelligence show, proudly brought to you by Sensory Intelligence Consulting. With me is the founder and CEO of Sensory Intelligence Consulting, Dr. Anne-Marie Lombard. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Matt. Lovely to be here and lovely to share the message of how do we make work easier and better for ourselves on a daily basis.
There we go. And this is episode 3 of a 3-part series. If you haven't caught episode 1 and 2, highly encourage you to go and catch those as well. This is a very important conversation. Just to paint a picture of where we are in the show, I've discovered my own sensory intelligence. I did an assessment with Dr. Anne-Marie. It's based on my unique DNA. It takes about 15 minutes. It's matrix-based, 120 questions, but it helps me to understand from a work environment perspective where I am best suited to work from home, in a corporate, maybe a combination of both. So I have the ability to adapt to both. My producer, of course, as we touched on in the previous episode, doesn't. He should be working from home. If you're a leaf, which we'll get into again, I'm sure, you want to be working at the office. So this is about helping you create an environment where you're the most productive, happy, and fulfilled person you can be. And so if you haven't caught episode 1 and 2, go and check those 2 things out now. So we're going to be getting into the link to this whole discussion around business performance. So Anne-Marie, why is this important in terms of business performance? Why does knowing your own sensory intelligence important in the context of business performance?
Matt, thanks. It's such an important question. First and foremost, people are people. They're not robots. They're not computers. They're not machines. Okay. And sensory intelligence is really your brain perceives your environment through your senses every day, and it impacts your attention, your emotion, your behavior. And these 3 functions are fundamental to business performance. So if we want to optimize people, we need people and we need to help them to understand how are they wired, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. And we are always trying to aim to get goodness of fit in environments. And yes, in business, it is sometimes difficult because you're navigating a whole group of people, but understanding that is really, really important. So if we want to optimize people, we need to give people insight and we need to give them strategies so that they can optimize themselves, understand their environment, utilize their environment so that they can be the best version of themselves. So it is really about self-awareness, self-development, and self-knowledge. We're living in this knowledge economy, and it's all about being more self-aware and actually knowing what's best for you and what's not best for you. And important, there's no right or wrong.
Yeah.
Yes, we determine your thresholds. Are you a trunk, a leaf, or a root, which is a lovely analogy. It's very non-threatening, wonderful terminology to use in teams particularly, but there's no right or wrong. There's just different. And we all function differently and we need different things, also from an environment point of view. And it's business leaders, it's in their best interest to understand this in order to optimize productivity.
Mm-hmm. And stick around, guys, to the end of the show. We're actually going to give you an amazing offer that's going to help you and the teams that you work with discover their own unique sensory intelligence. And I'm sure that we can all agree, if we can be more productive and happier people, we'll have a better business at the end of the day. So, Anne-Marie, I'm going to bring up the report of my particular results. And I'd love for you to talk to me about strategies based on my own unique findings. So I think there are going to be different strategies depending on who is taking this assessment and who they are as individuals and or collectively as teams. So I'm going to quickly bring up the report. I'd love for you to talk us through strategies. So it's great to be self-aware, right? But you actually need to do something with the environment that you're in. Otherwise, the results aren't going to come, right? The change isn't going to come. We're just going to continue to be overwhelmed, continue to be stressed, continue to be unhappy, distracted, and unproductive. So I'm going to bring up the results now. So what kind of strategies are important to know here as it relates to, sensory intelligence for me personally? And I'd love my audience just to go on a journey with us around how to implement strategies that can actually help them become more high performance orientated.
Yeah, yeah. Matt, obviously you're a trunk, so you are dead set in that middle, quite neutral in your brain response to the environment. And remember, that's just one part of the group. As I said, there's no right or wrong. So from a leadership point of view, so firstly, there's many ways to slice this, to look at it. From a leadership point of view, you're possibly very flexible, very fair, and very adaptable. And as I've mentioned before, you've got a natural ability to mediate. Okay. So we would find that your roots in your group, like Mav, your producer, will say no. Your leaves in your group will say yes. And you would have a role as a neutral, as a trunk, to navigate that yes and that no. So you've got the natural capability to listen to both sides of these because of your neutral response and your flexibility. So as a leader, you possibly find it easy to navigate extreme territory from what people are giving you. And some people might say, oh, well, is this the best leader? I've been asked that question so many times in the past. Not at all. Not at all. Okay. Root leaders work differently to leaf leaders, but being in the middle just means there's an easier navigation. So you will have to take a mediating role because that's your natural capacity. And the flexibility is definitely there for you. Then the other thing that we want to understand, teamwork. How do you work best with other people? And again, your ability to bring people together would be very important. I always say our neutrals and our trunks are the white of the Oreo cookie. I love that analogy because for me it works really well. So you definitely have got navigation capacity to work with a great range of people, bringing them together. So that's definitely what you need to do. Something else that I think is so critical and so simple yet overlooked is, where do you sit? So if you would have a meeting, you can kind of sit anywhere. And I'm going to use a case study of a previous team that I've worked with. It was just fascinating. And it's going to deviate a little bit off from yours, Matt, but it's so important to discuss that. So going into any kind of a corporate environment, a boardroom environment, a meeting environment, you would be happy to go sit anywhere. I've worked with a root leader many years ago. He was part of a mining company, and he was in a group where really the group and the team didn't understand him. And we worked through this process, and the penny dropped for them when they realized his seating position in their corporate meetings was the definitive factor whether it was an easy meeting or a difficult meeting. So with him being a root, being very sensitive to his environment, if he was seated towards the back and he could watch the opening door and people coming onto him, he was more amenable, he was easier to talk to. They run through their meetings so much easier, as opposed to when he was sitting with his back to the door, people came in behind him, jostled or touched him, and then went to sit in front of him. He was a lot more argumentative. They had a lot more disagreements. There were a lot more conflict. And I remember that day was, it was such an aha moment for this team to really understand that where you sit in a meeting, where for you it's like whatever, roots versus your leaves have a very particular way, in particular from a root point of view. So your seating is something that we definitely can look at. And while we've talked that you can work anywhere, so whether you work at home or the office, you've got that flexibility. We need to navigate that for the roots and the leaves, obviously differently. So we talk about teamwork, and then we also how to improve your productivity, keeping routines or schedules. Roots need huge amount of routines. Leaves doesn't need that much of a routine. Matt, you need to have a balance of the both. You can have some surprises, some stuff that is unplanned, but also have some routine in the process as well. And then also making the most of your open plan office environment. If you are sharing space with others, you can also use your headphones when it's needed, but you can also move between collaborative space and focus spaces pretty easily. And I've talked about seating. Seating for productivity is, I think, something that no one thinks about of in business, but it's one slice of what we do in Sensory Intelligence. It's not the whole thing, but I've just seen major aha moments in this particular area. And it's simple, just choose your seat better.
So that's really interesting, right? Because you think there's a one size fits all for everybody, don't you? And according to my data, I think something like over 10,000 individuals have taken this assessment, and you have practitioners, almost 500 of them, who are working with companies and individuals within companies to really help them understand basic things like, well, where do you sit? It's crazy, right? Like you don't think like where you sit in a boardroom is actually going to make any difference whatsoever to how you will conduct yourself. So like I personally always sit at the head of the table because I want to see everybody that I'm talking to. And as a CEO, I don't want to be looking left and right. You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't fit my dynamic as a leader, which is interesting, right? Because now I know based on the results that you're sharing with me that little things like this can actually affect my productivity, how I deal with teams as a leader, and ultimately making the most out of any environment that I'm in. But the first step is becoming self-aware around what is your own personal requirement and, in terms of like the best environment, because I imagine like the more people you have in the business, I don't care if it's like one person or 5,000 people, if you can get the people to be more productive, the whole business will just improve in terms of its performance overall.
Absolutely. Matt, something that's very interesting that I've seen a great emergence is even in the space of architecture and workplace design, which is a fascinating shift that we are seeing, that how we design workspaces is now getting a focus on. They call it designing for neurodiversity. But in my opinion, neurodiversity is we are all different. We have different needs. So if we look at spaces versus it's a collaborative space or a focus space, that if we put people in the right environment within a workspace, we actually unlock the best level of performance and productivity for them. And isn't that ultimately what we want? I mean, we're employing people to work in our businesses and we want them to produce best quality work for long periods of time. And that's really based on how does the brain actually modulate and work through all of your sensory stimulation within your immediate environment. And if we can, put these areas together so that they fit a particular individual, and we can do that in shared spaces. Who's sitting at the end versus in the middle versus 2-ear headsets, 1-ear headsets, noise cancelling headsets, close to the bathroom, far away from the bathroom, next to a plant, next to a divider. There's many things that we can do about that to optimize space for individuals, because we want to release brain function, we want to release productivity, we want to release energy. And this is core. What is the output of, your senses and your environment? Environment matter. Small things matter. We work with someone where we've changed their seating, move away from a computer and printers, turn down your ringer volume. There's so much that we can do around your digital space as well, to remove distraction, to remove stress, to remove unnecessary, channeling your energy away from what you are busy doing. So if we start talking about digital space, I mean, that is a whole world on its own. Who should actually have more windows open? Who should have less windows open? Who should work on one task at the same time? Who can work on multiple tasks at the same time? It's all, how does your brain process stimulation in your environment? What comes naturally for you? What's your sweet spot? The higher the threshold, the more windows you can have open, the faster you can work, but you also make a lot of mistakes. The lower the threshold, the less windows you should have open, the less information, the more detail you are. Yes, you work slower, but you make less mistakes. It's just one of the extremes, some of the extremes that we're working with. And if we understand this, we can definitely maximize people. Oh, and we remove a lot of judgment. It's such a human thing. We label others and we judge other people because they don't do things the way that we do. Well, they're not supposed to do it like that. We are all different. Allow every individual to bring their best version of themselves to work. And it boils down to what the brain does with the senses. And it's fundamental. We can't change that. It's not a decision that we make to act in a particular way. It's fundamentally part of how we are wired, and there's no right or wrong. And if we blend teams with a combination of this, it's beautiful, because then we act and we play to our strengths. We know what we should be doing, what environment we should be in, and work is just more fun and we get more done. Absolutely.
And it rhymes.
It rhymes. And it rhymes. You're right.
And
we make beautiful music. And
there
we make beautiful music in the process. We have a wonderful orchestra. It's like an orchestra. Everyone has a role to play. We won't get the output if everyone doesn't do their different tasks. So, if business want to optimize people, everyone is unique and different, unlock their strengths. And what we are saying is understand the environment and how it influences an individual's brain. And if we can identify that and unlock it, we make life easier. People will be less stressed and more productive, period.
I like the analogy of an orchestra, right? Because if you have the violinist there, right, or the guy in the trombone or the trumpet, like off key, the whole sound isn't where it needs to be, And so you do this assessment as individuals and then as teams, and then you can start to figure out collectively, well, who is actually off tune and who should not be playing the trumpet, who should be playing the trombone, do you know what I mean? Or the cello or whatever the case might be. And then how does sensory intelligence consulting work with companies to implement these key findings at an individual and at a team level?
Yeah, that we do both. We believe the individual first should take ownership and accountability for their own performance, their own health and well-being, because we've also spoke about health and well-being here, and it's really, really important. So whatever we do, everyone will do a sensory matrix. So they will first and foremost be able to identify their own triggers, their own energizers, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. So that individual learning is first and foremost really important. And it's often aha, like, wow, no one has told me this about myself. And then secondly, we obviously do that for teams. And then in teams, we work through either workshops or individual coaching. We prefer workshops. We love working with groups and teams. And yes, we do it all online. It works. Online training does work. And then we will take teams on a journey, whether it will be around performance or productivity or sharing spaces or team building. We work around digital wellness, removing digital fatigue. We have a big focus on health and well-being for a team. The team building stuff relationship is really, really awesome. We also have focused on work-life balance. With hybrid working, with post-COVID working, we all seem to struggle with where does work end and life begins, because it's often the same space. We don't have the capacity to move from one environment to a different environment. So they kind of merged and blended. So we also work with work-life balance. And we also do a bit on digital communication, using the sensors for teams to work together. I've once worked with a team that said, oh, Anne-Marie, we're very disconnected. You need to help us. So then went onto the school. Everyone's videos was off. I'm like, come on, guys. Let me see your faces. So it's also how do we use the sensors to communicate online? So there's variations to it, Matt, dependent on a client's needs. But it is definitely the self-learning and then the team learning. And then we do a team tree where you would get a tree for yourself. Then we would also do team trees. Yeah. So who are the roots? Who are the trunks? And then who are the leaves? And we talk about that dynamic. What does it mean? How do people use it? And it's aha moments. I once remember there was an HR manager that we worked with many, many years ago. And I followed him up 4 years afterwards. I said, tell me about what's happened after our work with you. And he said, Anne-Marie, the day after our workshop, I changed 2 things. I've put my phone on vibrate. I turned the ringer volume down, and I've built 15 minutes between all of my meetings. He was a root. And he said, my life changed as a result of it. 4 years later, he still remembered it. He was still implementing those habits. He was still maintaining that. Simple, no? He actually put his ringer volume down on his off from his phone, and he built 15 minutes between his meetings. Isn't that simple and easy to implement? It is. And that's the kind of stuff that we do. It's not high-level stuff that you need to think and suddenly do differently. It's practical day-to-day stuff. Small things really matter.
Okay, fantastic. So as I mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, we have an amazing offer for you today. So we want you to become more productive, happier, healthier individuals and teams. And so Anna-Marie and her team have given us an amazing offer today, which you can get at learn.sensoryintelligence.com/sign up. I'm going to bring it up on screen for you. And so this is the assessment page or the sign-up page. There's some amazing information here around how to improve your life in general through this process. But this is the offer. So it's for individuals and groups. Is that correct, Anna-Marie?
Absolutely, Matt. We've made it available for individuals, also for groups. Individual, if you go online, it will take you through an automated process. If there are teams that want to do it, it will just bring you to an order form. You'll just have to connect with us, and then we'll process that for you manually, because we don't know whether you want 30 or 500 or 5,000. So we'll actually then process that manually for you. But that's feedback that we would love to get from teams. Yeah.
Okay, so it takes about 15 minutes. I have done this assessment in the previous episode of this series. We actually share my unique results. I highly recommend this to you. For me, it's been really revealing to understand who I am as an individual and the role of sensory intelligence in me being the most high-performance CEO and entrepreneur possible. So it does cost $59, but you can buy one, get one free. The offer is available until the 15th of August, so do not wait. Go and get your hands on it. It's really worth the money and the time and the investment, considering the upside that you can get as a consequence or outcome of this process. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Anna-Marie, great to chat to you again. It's been a real privilege and honor to get your story out onto a global stage.
Thank you, Matt. Lovely to be part of this. And take care, guys. You do matter, and small things is really important.
Amazing. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again soon.
Cheers.
Ciao.